Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman. You're about to make the jump from the dishonest mainstream media into free and independent thought from key thought leaders on the subjects of culture, causes, politics, and faith.
How much is two girls for a half hour?
I really wanted my mom to love me. And I also didn't want her to be sick.
I'll do it for 150.
Craig Sawman Sawyer is a former member of SEAL Team 6 and the founder of Vets for Child Rescue. V4CR is dedicated to raising awareness about the epidemic of child rape trafficking right here in the United States, exposing this fastest growing criminal enterprise on earth and putting predators behind bars. He joins us today to talk about his work rescuing children from predators, his new documentary Contraland, and what you can do to help save children right here in the U.S.
Real men do not prey upon defenseless and precious children. Knock it off, or we're coming for you.
Welcome, everybody. My guest today is Craig Sawyer. Craig is a veteran, former Navy SEAL, and former team member of SEAL Team 6. And he is also the founder of Vets for Child Rescue, an organization that is dedicated to ending human trafficking, especially among sex trafficking and sex trafficking of children. So, Craig, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's really an honor to talk with you.
Thanks for having me on.
Sure thing. And before we dig into kind of the messiness of what we're going to be talking about, if that's fair to say, I just want to go ahead and maybe start with a moment of levity. So, your opinion, did Epstein kill himself?
If he did, he's some sort of magician, because I just certainly don't see how.
Yeah,
Paper sheet, how you can break those bones in the throat like that. The damage that was done does not seem, that level of force does not seem possible with paper sheets that he had there in that room.
No doubt. Well, once again, thank you so much for being on here, because I think it's really important, not only what you're doing, that you're able to come and share at this time, and with everything that's going on in our world, man, it's really needed. I would say this, it's dire, especially for some of my audience members who are Christians, but certainly for everyone, that we shine a light, and that we become informed about what it is that you're doing on a regular basis and what's going on in our nation and around the world in terms of human trafficking and sex trafficking. We can no longer turn a blind eye to this stuff. It's not only just a travesty for individuals, but it's a worldwide, global pandemic, I guess, if you want to call it that. And we need to speak up against it, and we need to become more informed. We can no longer use ignorance as an excuse for letting these kind of things take place. And I would just say this, for those who are listening who are Christians, who have an obligation to the truth and a responsibility to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, we're in danger at this hour of losing our prophetic voice. And by prophetic voice, I mean, I'm not talking about the future. I'm talking about prophetic voice in terms of the church has always had a voice that was able to speak about injustice and able to speak against things that are going on in our culture. And if we continue to remain silent, we will lose that right. And certainly it will cost lives and certainly cost a bunch of scars and bruises. So I'm really, really happy to have you on today to talk about what's going on in the world of human trafficking.
Yeah, well, I think as Christians, we have a duty to lead from the front and to be the light, to carry the light into the darkness and shatter that evil darkness. And I think there are too many Christians that have been misguided, if you will, in that they feel like being meek means that you don't engage, you don't assert yourself for good, and that you don't shine the light, that you just stand there and be trampled and run over by evil. Yeah. And God knows the evil side of our society has been asserting themselves wildly, and they've been taking all of our freedoms and liberties and driving us out of our churches and conducting so many campaigns, if you will, against our ability to worship and live the lives that we believe in, and take away again our freedoms and liberties. And we have just been, on the whole, letting them, and that's not the way we are meant to be, in my opinion. I think if you despise evil and you despise abuse, you despise tyranny, then standing there and watching it happen is certainly not going to change it. And we are empowered with the ability to stand up and speak our voice and take lawful action and take meaningful, effective action against it and assert ourselves for good. And so that we can be that light. Otherwise, it'll be taken from us just like it has in so many communist countries over the last century.
Come on.
Over 100 million citizens, many of whom Christians, lined up and gunned down and exterminated, and Nazi Germany style, in mass graves in 25 countries around the world where communism has been tried. And at the heart of communism is Karl Marx's theory, and he was literally a Satan worshiper. He was a Luciferian. That's where this whole big government, communist, socialist, Marxist mindset comes from. The radical left's agenda is essentially satanic, and it's abusive. And we, the Christian population, must not tolerate it any further. This is war. They are making war against us, and we are standing there ignoring it, getting our tank filled on the prosperity gospel. And my, that's so attractive and that feels so good. Sure. It's the sugar frosting is so tasty. Meanwhile, we're getting the pants kicked out of us by pathetic evildoers who don't hold a candle to us.
Yeah.
And the merits of what they believe. They can't stand toe to toe and compete on their beliefs because their ideals don't work. We have wholesome, effective, prosperous, fair ideals that come from a divinely inspired Bible with thousands of years of knowledge and again, divine wisdom, and we're not using it, not adequately enough. And so I would encourage Christians, stand up. Now's the time to fight. We are under attack. Just because you don't have hatred and war in your heart doesn't mean that we're not under full attack from the radical and even demonic left. So it's full on. And if you don't believe that they're demonic, look at the legislation that they're pushing, perverting the children younger and younger, and teaching them all, enforcing upon them all manner of perversion at earlier and earlier ages, disarming the populace. Why? Because communist governments, whenever they've conducted genocide campaigns, they've always disarmed the populace first. An armed populace cannot be lined up and systematically murdered like that. So they need to render us defenseless first. And so, folks, we've got to pay attention. We've got to stand up and unite and realize that we are under attack.
It's fascinating too. I mean, that's spoken like a warrior, but it's also not just a warrior, because fair to say, I may work out from time to time, but I don't definitely have the background or the pedigree that you do. But what I do know is, as a Christian, historically speaking, Christians have always stood in the gap, historically speaking, against oppressive regimes. And maybe I shouldn't say always, because sometimes we've been on the other end of that. But historically speaking, we have a pretty good track record in terms of people like Martin Luther and people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, people who really stood up. Not that they were brave or courageous, but that they understood that they have an obligation to the truth. And certainly back kind of at home with what you're talking about, not only are we living in a day and age where we're told that liquor stores are essential, addiction is on the rise, suicide is on the rise, but churches are being shut down and told that they can't reopen. And then the sad and the scary thing is that Christians are the ones who are pioneering some of this, saying, oh, well, we have to be good, obedient citizens, and we have to stand by and just obey what the government says, using verses of Scripture and chapters of Scripture like Romans 13. And the reality is we got to get a backbone. We got to take a stand. We have to fight back. If $36 billion dollars of industry is not enough to realize, hey, human trafficking is a problem. If we don't realize it from the fact that the biggest criminal enterprise on the planet is human trafficking, if we don't realize it from the fact that 24 million people, if not more, closer to 25 actually, the last time I checked, are presently slaves, held against their will in our world, then I don't know what will wake us up. One of my favorite quotes, by the way, is by Martin Niemöller, and he was a guy that was a pastor in a German church during World War II and before that. And I can't get the quote specifically, but essentially he said this. He said, they came for this group and I was not of that group, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for this group, but I was not of that group and I didn't say anything. And then finally they came from me, and there was no one left to speak. So we, especially if you're a Christian and you're listening today, some of the things that we're going to be talking about, you need to be informed. We have to stand up. We have to fight. We have to figure out how we can support organizations like what you're doing and continue to be the voice of reason and truth in a world that is increasingly becoming further and further away from the country that we've known.
Yeah, agreed. And it's an incremental encroachment, and it goes only one way, and they will never stop. We have to assert ourselves and drive them back. And you don't have to break the law. What you have to do is stand up and change the law. We have to get in there and fight for the laws that we want, that represent us, because right now the only laws really seem to be getting passed are getting passed on the radical left, as far as the global Marxist godless society that the global bankers, the guys that move $500 trillion around the planet, it's what they want. And there is no Jesus Christ in their world. There is no United States in their world. In their model, there's one world government that they control, and we end up being slaves. It's if you read their legislation, it's diabolical. It's absolutely tyrannical. And so shame on the American populace for not being more informed. We've got a very problematic mainstream news media that are complicit, that are just programming our citizens 24 hours, bombing us with very harmful disinformation. And that's a huge problem that we're going to have to solve. We cannot sustain that level of deceit indefinitely. It's unsustainable. We have to do something about the media, because too many people still believe what the media, the mainstream news media, who are all owned by the way, those of global Marxist political ideology, and the American populace are still largely unwitting to it and believe them and act accordingly and vote against their own best interests. Right. And so that level of deceit is not sustainable. Bible says Satan is the father of lies. That's basically all he has. And if we take that away from him, we can change things for the positive on a mass scale. We got to return to speaking truth to our populace.
Well, let's do that today. I mean, in our own little way. Certainly, you're doing this on a much grander scale, but at least on the show today, that's what I kind of want to talk to you about. Is I want to get into the weeds of kind of what's going on in terms of human trafficking, pedophilia rings, and the real need for us to do something about this. But let's just say this: even if you're not a Christian and you're listening today, and it's undeniable that the news media is totally corrupt and will do whatever they can to try to influence with narratives. And we'll talk about kind of a media narrative as it pertains to what it is that you specifically do here in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I was talking with somebody who kind of aligns himself on the left, who's in my family the other day, and they said, well, Donald Trump is so dishonest. And I was not even going to have that conversation. So I said, you know who else is dishonest? Every single politician that has ever existed is dishonest. So it's like, what is the deal with this pearl clutching now all of a sudden where we're so mad at Donald Trump, and really, I think we've seen some pretty surprising things under Donald Trump in terms of, at least for me, of where the news media aligns itself. Some pretty ridiculous things. So suffice to say, that's why this podcast exists, to try to give people information outside of the mainstream, because you're hearing something today that, even though we may not have the same kind of reach as a CNN or anything like that, you're hearing something today that CNN will never cover that we desperately need to be talking about. So let's do that. So by way of kind of an introduction, let's reverse course a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your military background, what you've done, and then how you came to starting Vets for Child Rescue and what it is that you guys do.
Yeah, well, I started off in the Marine Corps. I wanted to go into Force Recon and be the Special Forces unit of the military service branch with the hardest reputation. And the Marines were attractive to me for their esprit de corps and their tradition and their history. and I wanted to become part of the Marine Corps. And so I did, and I went and applied for Force Recon, and realized at the time, this was in the early 80s, that unit did not have any political backing or funding then. So they had no mission. They weren't utilizing the unit, and they weren't running training classes or training workups, screening for that unit. So the people in the Marine Corps told me at the time, well, Sawman, if you want to do spec op stuff, you should have gone to the Navy, because they're the ones with all the toys, all the budget, and the political backing. They're the ones really doing stuff. And so I did what I had to do to get out of the Marine Corps and over to the Navy, and up through, BUDS, SEAL Team 1, became a sniper and sniper instructor, and combat action, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then got picked up for DEVGRU, spent the rest of my Navy SEAL time at that tier 1 level at DEVGRU, and ran those operations. And fantastic guys, man. What strong, highly capable patriots. Privilege and an honor. And then when we started having children, I went into the Federal Air Marshal Service, and I did 5 years there, federal law enforcement. And then I started doing high threat mobile security in the war zones, protecting our high ranking diplomats and government officials for the Department of State and intelligence agencies that we don't talk about, moving their people around from meeting to meeting in the war zones, and making sure they don't end up on Al Jazeera on the evening news in an orange jumpsuit. and then I did some film and television work. I started doing that to transition home more, so I could be home to raise my children, and ended up over in Africa running counter poacher operations for an Animal Planet series. And then I worked my way back home again, trying to stay home more. And a friend of mine from the CIA was the one that really let me know about child trafficking in the United States. He goes, "Hey, Craig, with all your horsepower and your capability, you may be able to help with this child trafficking thing. Here's how bad it is." And he said that the area just north of Houston, Texas, where we had grown up, had become the epicenter of child trafficking in the United States. And he was explaining it to me, and some of the federal agents were explaining to me how dark and diabolical it was, and how pervasive it was, and how children are being kept in dog kennels in some cases and live there, only to be taken out to be raped and put back in. And how they sometimes in wealthy neighborhoods, one of the homes was just had a certain number of children in it. People, clients, if you will, go to the home, rape the children, and leave the neighbors unwitting to it, because they just didn't understand the nature of the threat. So I thought, okay, for anything that is a domestic covert operation, the best weapon against it is to expose it, to rip the lid off of it, to have all the neighbors and all of the citizens and all the law enforcement understand exactly the nature of the threat, so that we can all create a hostile environment against it, a non-permissive environment, we would call it in the military, against that type of operation. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I founded Veterans for Child Rescue, and you can visit our website at vetsforchildrescue.org, and we've got a wealth of information there to empower.
And by the way, that's
populace.
vets 4 with a number 4.
Yes, sir. And you can actually spell it either way. It'll still drive you to the site. But it's empowering to the American people. It shows them what they need to know to protect their children and protect our country from this fastest growing criminal enterprise on earth, estimated $38 to $50 billion a year criminal enterprise, larger than all pro sports combined. NFL just being one sport, NBA, all of them. Major League Baseball, it's bigger than all of them combined. So imagine how much suffering has to be happening for people to pay that kind of money to abuse the children. It's heartbreaking, and I could not look away from it. And at the core of it, it is a spiritual predation upon God's most precious and innocent. So when you look at a crime spree like child trafficking, there's several aspects of what makes it so big. Number one, financial, right? So financial crime, $38 to $50 billion. Okay, there's the criminals that want to just do that for the opportunity. Number two, the political leverage. They blackmail each other, they film each other doing God knows what with children, and then they blackmail each other over that. Number three is the perversion, the weirdos that get off on having sex with children And at the bottom, most rancid core of it is the clash between good and evil. And that's the spiritual side, that those that worship the ancient, gods, Moloch, biblical, satanic figure, and that they believe that doing the most unthinkable to God's most precious and innocent is what they are to do. And so they're very, very sick minds. And the children, no matter which reason the people are harming children, it's all bad for the kids. It destroys their little minds, even if they survive it physically, and many don't. And I just decided I had to fight back. So we started filming a documentary as that big alert piece. The big Paul Revere, hey, America, here's the threat. And the documentary is contralandmovie.com. You can go there and watch it for free.
Fantastic.
3 years filming it in 5 different countries. And it is a gut punch of reality. And it is a very empowering alert piece on what's going on, the nature of that crime spree. Whether it's pleasant viewing or not, it is empowering viewing, and every American needs to know and watch it. And you can help become part of the solution in many, many ways from it. But please do watch it, contralandmovie.com. And in it, we run sting operations, joint operations with federal and local law enforcement. We've gotten 23 arrests on child predators and warrants already, with a 100% conviction rate. And right now we're expanding with dozens of new investigators, federal criminal investigators hired that have just recently retired from different agencies on our investigations program. And we're expanding and doing a whole new television series that's going to keep pounding out that message every week and showing people what's going on. Very powerful stuff. And I'm just grateful. And
Now, can you share the name of that series?
Not yet. We don't have a title for the series, but very wealthy, he's a genius, a technological genius who's conceived it. He creates a lot of intellectual property for our Department of Defense, our intelligence community, and so forth. And in fact, that's where I met him, was at a conference of American patriots who are this pool of talent who create a lot of the intellectual property that run the software and hardware and systems of our aerospace industry, or DOD, our intelligence community, and they are all sick of their inventions that they submit to safeguard our homeland going straight to China. Immediately to China. Chinese have all the technology that we do because of families like the Bidens and others that have sold out our national security for tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars over the last couple decades. So China's really, really gotten itself very deep in our national security affairs, and we've got to root them back out. So that's where I met this gentleman. He's absolute legend, and we're privileged to have him conceive it. And he's successful in the film and television industry already, and that's why he recommended that he create a series for what we do.
That's fantastic. Now, have you guys been picked up yet?
No, we're in the early stages of it, but his model is he go after the money first. He's got one of the hardest things to do to get a series on the air is convince the network to fund the filming of the series, and to demonstrate to them that they'll make their money back through the commercial representation. Well, if you go after the commercial representation first, you've got all the corporations that'll buy up the ad space. Then you've got a money making package that you can just go to any network and say, hey, do you want to make many millions of dollars? Because here's the solution. We've already got it done. And it's just a matter of figuring out which one's going to work out the best deal.
Well, that's fantastic. I can't wait to see that when it finally comes out. Let me step back real quick. Now, I hadn't planned on talking with you about this, but you brought it up, so here we go. I am interested in, because you roll in circles that the average American would not. Now, I want to come back to the main thing first, to be sure, with human trafficking and sex trafficking, but in terms of national security, and in terms of China, and in terms of the Bidens, what do you know about the investigation, since potentially you roll in some of those circles, that's going on right now? Because, of course, pre-election, nothing to see here. All of tech companies are going to make sure that they hush down any representation of what's taking place. And then directly after almost, it seems, conveniently, the Electoral College puts Biden in. Now we realize, okay, well, there's actually an FBI investigation into this quote-unquote Russian disinformation that the FBI thinks there's something to, and now Joe Biden's son is being investigated. So do you know anything about that ordeal and what's going on, and maybe from a legal level or just from a media level?
Well, most of what I know on the Biden family, I've known for some time, and that Joe Biden, I can say this in all honesty, he's an absolute reprobate. I mean, there are times when, like the nuclear football, this is a matter of major national security. This shows you the level of character that he lacks, and the lack of concern he has for the safety of the American people. The nuclear football is a device by where the president or the vice president can launch nuclear weapons, and that's to be within a very close distance to them physically, in physical proximity at all times, period. And Joe Biden has left that nuclear football blocks behind him in another vehicle when he was going home on a visit with his family, and just completely blowing off national security, and the security detail around him were appalled. And I mean, he should have been, in my opinion, he should have been arrested right then and there as a major breakdown and failure of national security. But as far as being sold out to the Chinese, you only have to look online and do basic searches. We don't use Google anymore because Google's so corrupt and full of censorship now. But DuckDuckGo and some of these others, just start typing in Joe Biden and China and connections and corruption and all that, and you can see witness after witness after witness and case after case after case of people revealing evidence of the entire Biden family, Joe's brothers, the son, and all of the sex tapes and the laptop and the perversion and the pedophilia and the drug addiction, on and on and on and on. The commercial construction deals that the Biden family have benefited hundreds of millions of dollars from. It's beyond comprehension how they've gotten that far off the map of anything that's acceptable morally or ethically, and it kept a secret. And the only reason they've gotten that far is our mainstream news media has absolutely kept it silent, and our Department of Justice has absolutely been corrupted and failed to prosecute. They failed to carry out justice and bring accountability for those crimes against the American people. And so I'm adamant that the DOJ and our key federal agencies be systematically investigated and purged of their deep corruption before we can ever drain the swamp. God bless him. President Trump's been trying to drain the swamp, but he's got nothing but knives in his back from all directions in DC. Yeah. And we're going to have to go by agency and purge them of their corruption and reset them on their original chartered mission under new God-fearing, patriotic, loyal leadership, genuine leadership, not bureaucratic management, deep state management, but real, genuine American patriotic leadership in good faith for God and country, and they can start helping President Trump drain the swamp rather than obstructing him from it as they are right now. So it's deep, brother. It's wide. And people only need to do a search, and they'll just be overwhelmed with all of the information, all the people that are witness to it, and all of the cases and investigations that are ongoing. Because they'll not learn about it on the mainstream news media.
Absolutely not. And I would say the vast majority of people who will listen will probably be conservative, but maybe that's not entirely true. But at least in the conservative realm, we have this kind of thinking of, leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. And unfortunately, that's allowed the culture war to wage on without us making much ground and change the world in front of our very eyes. So I want to take a step away from national security. By the way, I'd love to have you come on sometime in the future, and I'd love to talk about politics, national security, and stuff. But
step away.
Yes, go towards the light. But I do want to focus on this because like I said, the vast majority of the people who are listening who are conservative may have different views, especially if they're libertarian about this. I'm interested in the role of legal pornography in the fight against human trafficking too. Okay, so for instance, Pornhub, the biggest pornographic website out there right now, just got caught for having child pornography on their website. Okay, so this is kind of tying all together with deep state and big corporations and all that stuff. So anyway, they were just caught with having this, and of course, they immediately came out with a good PR campaign and dismissed any knowledge of it, and then conveniently a day later changed their user policy where only verified accounts can upload content, because point in fact, they were uploading child pornography or allowing people to upload child pornography onto their site. So now, I'm just, even outside of the child pornography thing, I have a concern.
Though.
What's that?
Let's stop for a second.
Yeah.
Why did that happen? Why did that positive change occur? It only happened because good people stood up and asserted themselves and said this was harmful and bad. Change must come. And they demanded it. They didn't stay home and wring their hands and feel sorry for the children. They stood up and said, this is harmful. It's an abomination. It will not stand. We're going to drive this. We will attack you legally, and we will drive this from our nation. That's what we have to be as Christians.
Yeah. We got to get back to this idea. I don't know if you know Sam Childress or not, or have ever heard of him, the machine gun preacher. But anyway, Sam says this. He's a controversial dude, but he does say this, and I love it. He says, before you judge me for what I'm doing, ask yourself, what would you want me to do if it was your kid? Now, I think Christians have to ask themselves this question. If this was your child who was being trafficked, if this was your child who was being abducted, would you want the vast majority of churches to keep on pretending that everything's okay, figure out how to get blessed on a Sunday morning, or would you want this thing to be attacked with every bit of force that we could possibly muster to fight against this incredible evil in our nation?
I want to do this right now. I want to ask everybody that's listening to this. Put yourself into the child's space. Now you're the child. You're locked in a dog kennel, literally a dog kennel, and you're kept God knows where. And you're fed only God knows what kind of pathetic scraps. You've got no medical attention. Your body is battered and bruised and neglected, and you're taken out of that cage only to be raped by who knows what kind of abusive thug and put back in. That's your existence. Would you not be praying for all your worth that somebody was doing something to get you out of there? Somebody was coming for you, that you weren't forgotten, and that people weren't just sitting at home wishing that things were better, that they would actually care enough to do a little something to change your situation, so that millions more children next year aren't going to be put into the same situation and add to the horror, add to the suffering. Wouldn't you hope and pray for somebody to do something? And so I say, Christians, let's not just sit at home and wring our hands anymore. Let's take action. We can all write our elected officials. We can all get loud in a righteous way and say, no more, this shall not stand. Because God cannot bless the United States when we've got the fastest growing criminal enterprise on earth is destroying God's precious children. He cannot bless that. And we're complicit by allowing it. It can't thrive to that degree without elected officials being complicit and being tolerant of it. That's one thing we must not be tolerant of. We've been cry bullied. I like to use the term cry bully for the radical left. They want to play the victim, but they're the biggest bullies on the face of the planet. They want to cry bully us into silence so that they get their way. Meanwhile, the children are being absolutely destroyed. So yes, it's time for us to pull on our big boy pants or big girl pants and say, look, you know what? I have a voice. I'm one of God's children too. And I say that this has no place in our nation. We're going to put whatever political leverage and pressure on this problem as needed until we drive it from our nation. We have to actually absolutely actively denounce this, repent of it as a nation, and drive it from us so that God can once again bless the United States. Because I don't know if you've done a 360-degree visual scan lately, folks, but we are under absolutely diabolical attack. And we're in the process of losing everything. Haven't fought hard enough for it, and that's why it's happening. And I think it's time to assert ourselves. And again, there's a righteous way to do it. And even the good Lord Jesus Christ himself was capable of grabbing a whip and whipping some money changers and flipping over their tables and driving them out of the temple when they were behaving as total reprobates. So if the perfect life of the good Lord Jesus Christ was capable of that, then look at the diabolical abuse we're facing, and what would he expect from us? Pray about it, get deep in the word, find your solution, and become part of the problem, or part of the solution with us. Stand up and take action as you feel most led, but do something.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, people may be surprised, especially if you're not a Christian, but maybe even Christians too, would be surprised to hear that Jesus spoke in pretty audacious terms when it pertains to a child. In fact, he said that, paraphrasing here, essentially, it's better for you to be drowned than to mess with a child, and that if you harm a single hair on one of these little children, you're going to have to deal with me. And so Jesus was really, really tough, especially about little innocent children, and so we got to be too. And so here's another question, kind of dovetailing on that. I want to try to be fair to especially Christians and just say, I think it's that we have been lied to and we've bought into the lie. Now, that may be a pretty pitiful excuse, but it's an excuse nonetheless. Yeah, it's been very effective, and I've seen it most recently with these lockdowns and with COVID. The nonstop, incessant media spin and the narratives that we are given for our information have a large role to play in kind of some of the way that we docilely stand by. But again, we need to push that excuse aside. And let me just give you an example. And I'm going to say something that may be a little bit controversial here, but it's undeniably true. So we've heard throughout 2020, we've heard about systemic racism. If I've heard it on the news media one time, I've heard it 1 billion times. And I personally have an opinion here. I believe the term systemic racism is a carefully crafted phrase to do absolutely nothing. In fact, I believe if I were to go a little step further, I would suggest that the phrase was created to intentionally do nothing so that it can monetize the plight of black people in America. Because at the end of the day, let me prove that real quick. At the end of the day, if you're going to talk about systemic racism, what do you have to talk about? Well, you have to talk about policies that are racist. So maybe you want to talk about redlining or something like that. So why is the conversation systemic racism and not redlining, right? Why is the conversation, maybe even further, defund the police rather than to actually train the police or to equip the police or try to help the police de-escalate or whatever the case may be? But the biggest hypocrisy of all of this stuff that's being shoved down our throat, specifically with Black Lives Matter, is that there is such a thing as slavery that still exists in the world. So now we're chasing the ghosts of systemic racism in America, when there are actually people around the world who you have helped get out of real, true, blue, genuine slavery. There are black women and men, children, babies who are literal slaves. Slavery has not ended for those who have been sticking their head in the sand in America, especially. Slavery has not ended. So it's extraordinary to me that there is this deafening silence from everyone on the left, and especially in corners like with Black Lives Matter, maybe even feminist organizations, when we have women who are being abused and raped and treated as slaves to the tune of approximately 25 million or even more slaves in the United States. I'm just wondering what you make of the deafening silence on the left when it comes to slavery in our nation and around the world.
Well, it's orchestrated. Again, I talked about who own the mainstream news media, so they're going to bomb us with those lies 24/7 as part of that campaign of ideological subversion. I encourage everybody, write down this name, Yuri Bezmenov, Yuri Bezmenov, Bezmanov, I believe it is. Go on YouTube and look at his lectures. He speaks very powerfully because he was a defected Russian KGB agent who knew what their campaign was. And he talks about the ideological subversion, and he trains American. He was speaking in the 70s and 80s here in the United States about it very powerfully. Sadly, we did not listen to the degree that we should, but he's talking about Russia's campaign to attack our culture and everything that made us strong from within, our Judeo-Christian values that unite us and cause us to understand what we're about and why our culture is precious to us, our patriotism, the core family unit, on and on and on. Everything that made the United States, our hard work ethic, everything that made us so strong and insurmountable as an enemy. They could not beat us with tanks, planes, and guns, so they decided very systematically and deliberately to come and conduct a psychological campaign to attack our culture, to take over the United States without firing a single shot. They wrote their game plan out. We had it as early as 1958, maybe before that, but it was read aloud to Congress in 1963. So do a search on the 45 communist goals. You just have to type those 3 words, the 45 communist goals, and you'll find lists of it. There's things in there like condone violent rioting and protests as legitimate forms of grievance for special interest groups. There are things in there like take over both political parties, take over the news media, take over academia to begin conditioning the youth for socialism and communism. Everything that we're seeing playing out in our country that don't make sense to us, when we watch it, we're like, why are we doing that? That's counterproductive. This is a nightmare. It's because we already have the communist playbook. The mainstream news media is reading straight from it, poisoning us with the rhetoric and the propaganda to keep us from taking action in our own best interest. That's why I say we cannot sustain that level of deceit indefinitely. We have to do something about the mainstream news media. But that's what's going on. We're being turned against our own best interest from a systematic bombardment by a news media that's owned by our enemies. That's what's going on. And that's why a lot of Christians don't understand to stand up and fight back. They're being conditioned to be tolerant of every single thing that destroys our children, destroys our freedom and liberties, destroys our ability to gather and worship. But if you realize what's behind it, you realize you need to do the exact opposite, stand up and beat those things back. And those corporations that are lying to us off the air, get better people on the air, fix our educational system to train the children and the youth on the damages. Over 100 million people systematically murdered in genocide campaigns by big government sponsored genocide by communist and socialist governments, 25 countries in the last century. I mean, our youth aren't being taught those things anymore. It's being very systematically kept from them for a specific reason, to undermine us. And so we've got to fix those things if we are to be free, and our children and grandchildren are to have any prayer of being free. Because right now we've gotten so soft and so complacent, everything that we hold precious and sacred is being taken from us by the ravenous left.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, and kind of would bring us to our next point. I want to take some time to kind of try to take the blinders off of people, so that we can't any longer use the mainstream media as an excuse for why we don't understand what's going on. So, if you would, even though this may be kind of unsettling for some people, I want you to take us into Contraland. I want you to take us not only into the documentary, but also to the world of sex trafficking, and just share some of your experiences there, some of what you've seen out there and what is happening to children in the United States. I think that's important, but then also to around the world.
Well, what we learned in the filming of Contraland and our investigations already is that there are so many people that are in on child trafficking. What it is, and I think this is why God put this on my heart so overwhelmingly that I couldn't look away from it, is because it's the spiritual power base of the global elite, the radical left. All of those attacking our president and attacking our Constitution and our country have some sort of tie to pedophilia and the child trafficking that services that perversion. And at the core of it, it's spiritual, it's evil. The frontline clash between good and evil is over the children. The rest of those stuff that we're seeing are all symptoms of that clash between good and evil, but at the very core of it is the children. And the belief is that to defile, and the scripture about the millstone, it's better to have a millstone thrown, a large millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the sea than to defile one of God's precious children. Well, they are trying to do exactly that. They're trying to defile God's most precious and innocent. And that's their biggest, deepest, darkest secret. That's what ultimately we learned is going on. So with that, you've got a lot of the politicians up in DC, complicit in it, because they can blackmail each other and gain status and power. Or if they'll rape a child on video, then the powers that be that move the trillions of dollars around can give them, $50 or $100 million to help their campaigns, or move some chess pieces around to help their career, and because they know that they're owned. And so the wealthy elite aren't going to help. They're not going to fund someone like you or me, who's going to act in good faith. They're going to fund somebody who they can own, and they can only own you if they've got evidence on you that they can pull out at any time.
Well, let's dig into something. Let's dig in specifically to some of your own experiences, because I think one of the problems that we still run into with Christians and maybe just people in general is that we often dismiss. I would say if I told you in December of 2019 what was about to take place in 2020, almost every single person I know would say, "You're nuts. That's never going to happen. They're never going to shut down churches. They're never going to, that global pandemic, that's not going to happen. Rioting and looting in the streets when we're supposed to be quarantining, that's never going to happen." They would say that's ludicrous, but here it is happening before our very eyes. So I want you to share some specific stories that you've experienced in some of the stings that you've done and in some of the experiences you had. And I'm just going to go ahead, even though this is a grotesque question, I'm going to start it off by just asking this. What's the youngest child that you've ever seen raped?
I haven't seen any children being raped, thank God. I never want to. We know of infants, days old, being raped, and a lot of times it kills them. There's no low to which a lot of these people won't stoop. We put out an ad in our first sting operation. We put out an ad for a 12-year-old girl, either 12 or 13-year-old girl. I think it was 12. And it was a local ad. And in 30 days, there were 5,000 responses to that ad to come and rape a 12-year-old girl. And that was in Connecticut. And law enforcement there were like, my God, when we arrested, I think 5 there on that first operation in 3 days. And they said, man, we would have never guessed that this many predators. And that was 5 arrests with a 100% conviction rate. One of whom was a federal agent for the IRS. He had been FBI before, and then went to the Treasury Department, IRS. And, so we see that there's all kinds. You can't look at a pedophile and judge a book by its cover, really, in that sense, because evil can find itself into the heart of any weak-charactered man who's not strong with Jesus Christ. And
have you been surprised by some of the people that you've seen participate?
oh Yeah, one guy was an elder in the FLDS church, and he was a bus driver in Utah. And, we'd gotten notification from his family members that, yeah, he raped children, lots of children all the time. And he came to rape 2 girls in our sting operation. And we arrested him. He should have been put away for life and never to rape again. But my understanding is that a judge decided, oh, he's old, what harm could he do, and let him back out fairly early. Even though we were convicted, it had him for like 30 years to life.
Yeah.
Due to the evidence, the overwhelming mountain of evidence we had, complete conviction. So we cannot have crooked judges releasing child rapists, folks. We've got to drop the hammer on these judges. And George Soros, they won't let anybody say it. Like Newt Gingrich got cut off on Fox News when he started revealing to the American populace, most of whom already know, that George Soros funds district attorneys around the country. He funds their campaigns when they are of his mindset that they would not ever prosecute child sex crimes. And a lot of them, quite frankly, would not prosecute arson, looting, riot type of crimes either, because they're radical leftists and they're on board with whatever George Soros's dark and evil, wicked campaign and his agenda is. So, there was an active duty Army recruiter that came. There was there was a family. There was a man that was husband and father that was up skiing with his wife and 2 children. He came down in a minivan, left his wife and children up at the ski resort, came down in the minivan with 2 little car seats in the back. And and he tried to run when he realized he was caught. And of course he didn't get very far, but it was heartbreaking to see how many people had families that they hadn't considered, wife, children at home. We've had several of these perpetrators' families call us and thank us for arresting them. And that's something I didn't expect. That was a surprise. It was kind of a heavy thing, very emotionally impacting to have somebody's wife or children say, hey, you know what? Thank you for stopping him. And we didn't know. And, it's just, you got to do it. You got to stop the predator from destroying, countless children. And here's something that is important to know. The average number of children that a pedophile rapes throughout their lifetime is 70. The best they can estimate, it's 70, because some of them many of them like to work themselves into positions of unsupervised access to children, like a coach, Sunday school teacher, scout leader, those kinds of positions. And then they abuse those positions and ruin the public trust by raping the children. But sometimes they never get caught, and it's hundreds of children, 200 or 300 children. And some get caught very early on. So the average is 70 children each. So every child predator we arrest and put in a cell to rape no more saves countless children from being raped and destroyed. And when we interview the surviving victims, it's heartbreaking to hear the level of psychological and emotional trauma that brought upon them. Many of them kill themselves over it. Just the damage done, and they can't reconcile it, and they can't wrap their mind around why would somebody do that to them when they did nothing wrong. They were undeserving of it. And but the ones that survive it can articulate in their adulthood what they could not articulate when they were a child, and that's that it was absolutely devastating, and it changes the way I perceive everything now.
Yeah.
So their way of relating to a spouse, whether it's male or female, after that is different because of what they experienced. Yeah. It's a daily fight and struggle with these people, and we have to culturally rise up and turn against this and say, hey, this is not something that can be allowed here any longer.
Yeah. We didn't dig into it enough, but I'm sure you'd agree with me that legal pornography, there is no innocent act here. Even legal pornography is aiding and abetting in the sex trafficking trade, to be sure, but also in the pedophilia trade. Going back to
Well,
the
it feeds the sick mind.
yeah.
You know, people start feeding on that. It's like any other addiction. They get numb to one thing, and then they go to something more perverse to get their excitement, and then it gets worse and worse and worse until they're off into animals and child porn and things that are repulsive and repugnant to a healthy mind. They just grow increasingly sick, and I think you have to have a weak character to begin with to be susceptible to that. But when they pursue it, it's a downward spiral. And I ask a lot of the predators point blank, what made you turn towards children? Like, how did you get on this goat trail? And a lot of them will tell you, they'll lie about what their intentions were, but they'll be truthful about how they, got to where mentally the state that they're in. And it's informative. And that's why I ask them, because I genuinely want to understand so I can inform other people. How does this happen so that we can identify how to stop it? And porn's a big contributing factor, huge contributing factor. And it creates more demand, and that demand causes more children to be harmed.
Yeah.
So we've got to curb this, man. We've got to fight back. That's why I applaud what people did on the Pornhub situation. I applaud, when we were running Backpage ads, now Backpage is taken down.
Yeah.
And of course, the criminals score it out to other apps that they use, but now they don't have one central one that they're able to easily prey upon children with. And so we're just going to chase them off every app they go to.
Yeah,
and wherever the hunters go, we're going to hunt them and get them.
As they should be. So just a quick question. I think I know the answer to it, but I still have it, so I think other people may too. Why 13 years old? In some of the stings that you do, you advertise 13-year-old girls. So why is 13 a magic number for a pedophile?
It's not a magic number. I don't think it's a matter of practicality with what we can do. And for operational security, I'm not sure I want to go into detail on that, but it just seems like that age group, 12, 13, 11, 12, 13, 14, that seems to be kind of a pretty popular age group of what the pedophiles are after, and there are multiple factors for us as an NGO working with federal and local law enforcement, running joint operations of what we decide at the time. And but ultimately we just give the opportunity to the evildoer to do what he does, to demonstrate that he's going to actively pursue raping children, and they incriminate themselves to no end. And so that's one way to get them.
Well, and so to let people know at home too, this is something that exists, that whether it's at home or abroad, that there is a higher dollar value placed upon virgins, and so there's exploitation taken to the next level too, in terms of trying to find children who have never been touched, so that they can be the first one to touch them. It's really, really sick. I just want to kind of close out our time here together, kind of on I hope a meaningful note for people who are watching or listening. This hits home to you, not only because you're a father, but also because your daughter was also raped. For those who are listening, and they've been a part of sex trafficking, they've been held against their will, somebody that's been raped or somebody that's been abused, what would you say to that individual?
Well, to anybody that's been raped or abused, I would say, man, I'm sorry that was never supposed to happen to you. You did not deserve it. And our God is greater than that. The real Father is perfect and would never do that kind of thing. And he's there with wide open arms for healing and empowerment. And we're doing something about it now to try to prevent others from going through it. And I would just say, reach to God for your strength and your healing, and find your voice if you're inclined. Many victims can be powerful advocates and turn around and help others. And you'd be surprised how empowering it is to help others who are younger and haven't healed as much yet. And that can be healing for you as well. And I've seen and witnessed that a lot. Our own daughter, we ran joint operations with her. She served as a junior decoy agent with my team, and she helped us arrest 9 predators ultimately. And with a 100% conviction rate there too. So that was very empowering for her. So if you watch Contraland, you'll see her fight back. And maybe it takes some strength and inspiration vicariously through watching her go. But there's a lot of ways that we can step up and take something that's bitten us like that and analyze it in hindsight and realize, hey man, my God may have really given me something empowering here, devastating, although it may have been at the time. What might God be able to do with it now? What gift might that be if it's preparation and education for me to go and change the lives of countless others from it? What catalyst might that be for further positive action? And that's what we've done in our family, being attacked and abused, and my wife and my daughter. We just use it as motivation now to go and fight back, and it's healing and empowering for us. I would say maybe consider that for yourself, and fighting back in your own way, giving back in your own way, and God will bless you through it.
Yeah, absolutely. There are options, and there is a path forward to restoration and redemption, obviously through Christ. And then there's other organizations, even in the film, that you suggest. Your daughter was part of an equestrian kind of therapy, and there's other places in the film that you suggest. So I'll just say this: everybody and their mama needs to go and watch Contraland. Where can they find the film? They can find it at contralandmovie.com, correct? Where else can they find it?
That's the only, they can find it on YouTube as well, on the Vets for Child Rescue YouTube site, but the contralandmovie.com is the easiest way to find it. And it's aired to 90 million viewers on Daystar Network on July 25th. 90 million households rather, in US and Canada. And there's another network that wants to pick it up and air it. And we encourage any other network reps that may hear this, or please reach out to us. We would like to get it on your network as well.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic documentary. My wife went around the house and made sure every window and door was locked after she watched it. But it's important that we watch it because we need to be on guard. We need to be ready. We need to be equipped for the fight. So that said, one of the best ways that I know anybody listening or watching that you can go and fight this battle along with Craig is go to vetsforchildrescue.org. Go there, support these guys, and see what they're up to, because it's undeniably a fantastic organization. So, Craig, thank you so much for everything you're doing to rescue kids in our nation and around the world.
Thank you. No, it's a privilege. I'm being obedient and doing what I believe God would have me do. I can't look away. It feels too heavy on my heart. So I'm grateful for anybody that helps us get the word out and helps support our operations.
Absolutely worth it. Well, thank you so much. It was an honor to talk to you. You're a hero of mine, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Right on. Sounds good.
Bye, everybody. Our thanks again to our guests for being on the show today. Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman was brought to you by our sponsors. If you like what you heard today, please do us a big favor and give it a 5-star review and like it and share it with friends. And if you want to hear more awesome guests, make sure to check out past episodes. Indie Thinker is a nonprofit paid for by our sponsors and the generous gifts of people like you. In order to hear more great guests like you did today, please consider giving a tax-deductible gift by going to indiethinker.org. And just remember, your voice matters, but infinitely more when you think for yourself.